Hey friends and music makers, well, welcome back and welcome to this week's live stream, part 4 of my series covering music theory fundamentals for electronic producers. Hopefully that's you. Today we're focusing on writing melodies, both over existing chord progressions and from scratch. We're going to make melodies that are memorable, emotional, and we want to transform our tracks from amateur to pro. I'll break everything down in easy to understand terms specifically for Ableton Live users. Feel free, as always, to jump in with any questions you have or share your own ideas in the chat. My goal is to help you elevate your production skills and unlock your creative potential. So without further ado, let's dive into today's live stream and get stuck in. So as always, we're going to do a little bit of a test of some audio, and hopefully already the microphone is good. So if you are in the stream already today, say hello, and also if you can do me a favor, let me know that you can hear things okay. So let's drop our BPMs down a bit here. I think 89 is the right tempo for a second, just to have our audio test. Let's open up this loop all the way. Alright, we've featured these guys on the channel before, so I'm not sure if you recognize who that music is from. Again, it's very low tempo, so just it's a test anyway, but we can look into it in a little bit because there is a melody here, and so there's more than one thing that's going to be useful to take a look at this melody a little bit later. But in this case, I was just using it as an example to test the audio. I believe everything's good at this end. So as I said, if you are in the stream and you notice anything about my voice or the music, then do feel free to comment and let me know. So that, by the way, is Daft Punk, and it's doing it right. We did feature the Daft Punk in the bass video of this series. And by the way, if you're here for the very first time in this melody video, this is a part of a series that has gone from rhythm to bass to harmony last week, and now we're into melody. And we've been building through all these different music theory elements in a sort of correctly layered way, the way you want to sort of construct, perhaps, and understand how to construct if you're going to follow those steps as the way to make your track. But as you've probably seen along the way as well, all of these individual stages, harmony, melody, rhythm, and bass, they can all be a starting point. And over time, I hope you've been able to see that there is no rule book. We don't have to start our house and techno tracks with drums. We might do that a lot. That might help us get our groove and tempo and then the sort of physical side of the music going. But we could start with a bass, we could start with the harmony, a chord progression, we could start with a melody. But you know, this was in response to a poll I did on the channel some weeks ago now, probably a month or so ago, where I asked you, what do you struggle with music theory? And I asked, you know, whether it was bass, melody, harmony, or rhythm, and by far and away the two that sort of stood out as most people commenting that they struggled with, it was harmony, melody. So today we're on to melody, part 4. All right, so enough of me waffling away. Let's get stuck in here. Let's put our tempo back to 126 BPM, kind of a good working tempo. And let's have a bit of a look at what makes a good melody and what are some of best practices to avoid, right? So if we just have a quick look at this, we're going to be keeping our eyes and ears focused on things like this as we go along. It's kind of like our guide or cheat sheet. We want a good melody is generally simple and easy to sing. So if you can hum or sing your melody, happy days, you're onto a good thing. We want to keep it nice and simple. You can think of examples like nursery rhymes. They are killer melodies. They are sticking in your head like an earworm, whether it's Shaka or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. or Three Blind Mice. They are killer melodies, right? And we don't lose them from our conscious. Alongside lyrics, we're not doing singing here and actual vocals and lyrics, but alongside that, a good melody is what you're most likely going to remember about that tune. Not necessarily the drum kit, not necessarily the bass line. It's going to be something you can whistle, sing, hum, right? So there is a thing called a hum test, and that is a great thing. If you're making melodies, try humming them. If you can hum your melody, again, that can be a really good sign that you're onto a very winning formula. So good melodies, simple, easy to sing. I mentioned Hans Zimmer here. He also talks about in his masterclass video, one finger playing. That's what he wants out of his little motives and melody ideas, that he can just play them with one finger on the keyboard. Another nice thing to keep in mind. Memorable hooks, like I said, we want our listener, dancers, clubbers, we want them to go away remembering our tune if we can. As I said, then we're onto something really good. Emotion, if that's what we're looking for, happy, sad, you know, hopeful, all those good things, we can get an emotion from our melody. Balancing repetition versus variation. Now, I'll put my hand up. I'm sure many of us struggle with that, right? That's something that's going to make or break, again, a lot of things in our electronic music tracks is too much repetition, not enough variation. If we have too much variation, aka chaos, that's not good either. So we need to find that push-pull, the balance between repetition, great, that we keep that theme going, but then we also vary it enough as well to keep people from getting bored and into what we're doing. Complementary, not competing, that's going to be good to look at in a moment. We want it to complement our bass and our chords and things like that if we have those things already in our track. Now, a quick one here as well. This here is the pattern for the Imperial March for that sort of goes on the little theme in the background when Darth Vader kind of enters the building in Star Wars, and I'm sure many of you will know that. And let's just have a piano here. So I'm just playing it on my keyboard, and this is going to, it's a great example actually of reminding ourselves as well as we go through this. We'll keep going back to here a bit and thinking about it, that the Darth March or the Imperial March from Star Wars, if we just play the notes without doing what I was just doing a moment ago, so I'll just go through it again. Okay, so now I'm just going to play the notes, the pitches. Okay, I'll do it again. So maybe you notice something that's very different about it, right? So that's the pitches of the sort of main little riff of the Darth Vader March or the Imperial March. As I said, when he's sort of stepping in into Star Wars, that's the little theme that's going on in the background. But if I play it properly again, it tells us straight away, it's a really great example of how important rhythm is to your melody. Because if I just play the pitches and there's none of that rhythm, it doesn't work, right? But if I play the rhythm, even if I just play one note, it starts to be something that you can identify even if you don't have the pitches. Right? That's the rhythm. Okay, so that's really great example of if we didn't, here we're looking at the actual MIDI, I was just playing it on the keyboard, but if we don't have this little flourish and change of note lengths and rhythm, it sounds unidentifiable. And so we're going to see along the way that rhythm in a melody is as important as the pitches. And I really want to reinforce that. If you're writing melodies and you're here in the stream today and you want to learn, consider note lengths, rhythm as much as you're considering the pitches that you're moving the notes around in, because that Darth Vader March is distinguishable just from its rhythm. So we can move it anywhere on the keyboard. And it's got its own rhythm and it makes it distinguishable. If we're just playing the pitches, as I said, without that rhythm, we don't get any distinguishable characters or features. Also, I've got here Somewhere Over the Rainbow, What an amazing melody that is. That's a great example of intervals and flow. Okay, so a couple of famous examples there. Let's go and do our own thing now. So that's good melodies. We're going to come back, as I said, and keep an eye on all those different characteristics. Best avoided, might as well look at that as well, right? So our opposites to a good melody. Overthinking, overcomplicating, like I said, simple nursery rhymes. Keep it nice and simple. 3 notes, 1 finger playing, start like that. No need to go crazy and overcomplicate it or overthink it. Sound design versus melodic content. That's something you're going to see here as well. I use a piano. Why do I often use a piano or just a wavetable with a sine wave? Because I'm not thinking about a fancy preset that sounds amazing with reverbs and delays and all sorts of great effects on it. I'm trying to get a good melody here. Then I can put any synth I like on it or any instrument I like on it to play it back. So keep a really good tip for that is just to use a piano or just use a simple synth sound to write your melodies and then worry about that. So don't sound design first in this case. Let's get a good melody happening. Stuck in a loop and it's boring. We're going to look at some strategies for that in a little bit. And here's a little technical one, kind of ties into what we're going to be doing next. Semitone intervals over chords. We'll keep that in mind. We'll look at that when we're doing our example. So first example is going to be over existing chords. Why are we doing that one first today? Well, last week we did harmony and we made some chords. And so we might as well build on that video with this video and say, okay, we wrote our chords. Now, how do we write a melody to go with those particular chords, right? And so what we have is a few different progressions, but this was the progression that we sort of ended up with in last week's harmony video. And again, if you didn't see that video, check it out on the channel. It breaks down how we did a chord progression from a key and a scale, how we made it nice and smooth and voiced. And so it's an interesting chord progression. All right, so we need some sound that will help. Okay, let's start that again so we can kind of listen to our chords. And it's a simple chord progression, and they're all triads, so 3-note chords. And by the way, this is a beginner-friendly video series, so we weren't going advanced at this point in time. We're trying to break it down, so if you're new to all of this, that you can learn the most you can possibly with all the tips that I've kind of learned over 20 or 30 years of doing this, putting that all down into easy to understand. Okay, so we've got these chords. We did actually do one more step here where I actually even voiced it further in last week's harmony video. So we broke away where we don't have common tones. So for example, these 2 chords are sharing a common tone. The bottom note, the root note of each of those chords are being shared. We had an issue here where this chord, where these notes start, this is the original chord. When it changes to this chord, this is the original chord here, there is no common notes. So we actually broke up the 2 chords to make them go together nicely. That sounds like this. Right, so that's an even more nicer way to get those chords to come together, and you also end up with a little melody in here. So what I've done is I've actually taken that out in the one we just listened to first, so that we're going to sort of not have any melody, let's say, to begin with. So let's open up a new track next door and let's throw on there a piano. We've got a few of those kicking around. This is the Spitfire one, by the way, the Spitfire upright piano. So hopefully, I'm sure some of you are probably aware of the company called Spitfire. This is in the packs of Ableton Live since a long time. So collaboration with Spitfire. So you can download them if you head into packs and go and look for the upright piano. And as I said, it's courtesy of Spitfire, and it does sound nice. All right, so we've got our upright piano over here. We're going to be writing a melody over these chords. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy the chord clip over and drop it onto the new track. And why I'm going to do that is we're going to use that as a template, right? We're going to sort of keep all of that. And let's actually kind of like get rid of a few things that we can kind of see hanging around. We might actually just crop this. That'll do that. Perfect. As I said, we're going to remove those little melody notes as well that were inside of the final chord progression. So we've just stripped it down to that. And we're going to use this as a template, like I said. So we're going to put all the chords here, and then we can mute them. So we're not going to listen to them, but we can absolutely check in and know what chords we have to work with below. So I think if you're in the session view and you're going to do this, it's a good way to work. You're giving yourself a template. If you're in the arrangement view, let's say we also copy that over to here, drop it on there. What you can actually do, a little tip for you here, is I've kind of got an example already here, but let's use the little clip we've got. We'll get rid of this one, and we'll drag this over and drop it in here. And what you can actually do in the arrangement view is you can put it like this, and then what you can actually do, which is really clever, is you can put markers where every chord changes, which is kind of what I've set up roughly here. I've got a marker where every chord is changing, and then what you can actually also do is pop in and write what each chord is. So you could say this is an A minor, and so up here on the marker you can put A minor if you know what each of these chords are, and that means that you kind of understand what is going to be going on when you start working below it. This one's a re-voice chord, so it was originally D minor, and yeah, you can go and put a marker in, and then you can understand like what are the different notes of the chords and where do they change, right? And you can write along all these markers, chord 1, chord 2, 3, 4, and then you're going to be writing your melody on top of each of these chords, right? That's what we're kind of working on at the moment, existing chords. So that's a little tip there for doing it in the arrangement view. Set it out, pop some markers in, name each marker to what chord you've got below, and you can work on it like that. Over in the session view, I like it like this, and as I said, they're all there. We don't want to hear them. They're all nicely down here as a template. So we're going to write on top of that. So let's start with one of the first things we can do with over existing chords writing a melody. Let's start with chord tones. So if we think about these notes that we've got here, this is the chord that starts in the chord progression, and these are the chord tones. So we could write above it. So let's say we pop up to A3 here in the next octave, and we could start on an A, and that would be using a chord tone from the first chord. A2K77, how am I doing today? I'm doing very good. How are you doing? Hope my microphone is good, by the way, and hopefully just while you're there, can you just check how's the audio level? Hopefully we're good on all fronts. As I said, if anyone wants to let me know, that would be helpful. So one way we can write our melody here, like I said, it's a good place to start. So first melody over existing chord progression, we're going to use chord tones. So A, that is a chord tone, and it happens to be the root chord tone of this chord. Let's put in the next chord. Loud and clear. Awesome, mate. Thank you. Hi, Alex Moreno. Buenos dias. Good morning to you as well. Thanks also to AE2K77 for letting me know. That sounds good. So on the second chord here, we'd also have an A if we were using the lowest chord tone, but remembering this one's revoiced a little bit. So actually the original root note of this one is a D. So why don't we say we'll use another chord tone here, but we'll use the D instead of just repeating the A. That's not going to be all that interesting really, in my opinion. So then we can come across to chord 3 in our chord progression, and we can see it's got a G in the bottom. Again, that may well be a revoiced chord, a C major, but again, we could use the G. It's a chord tone, right? So we're sort of taking notes from the chord. If we don't like it, the movement of it, and it's boring, then we can use the C or the E. But sometimes, I guess what I was thinking in the beginning, perhaps I should make sure I clarify it, that one of the most simplest things you could be doing is using chord tones, but you could also be using the lowest root note of each chord. Okay, so we're going to run into the same thing a bit here. Because this chord progression is beautifully voiced now, we've got repetitions of some of the same notes, right? So I think actually this one, I'm going to bump from a G to a C. And then this chord, I'm going to use the G. So as I said, if I was following the lowest tones of all of these, I'd have a lot of repetition. I'd have two A's and two G's. That's not going to sound really interesting, right? So what we're doing is we're going to take chord tones, but in my case, I'm going to take different chord tones than just the root notes of the progression. Hopefully that makes sense. If anyone's not sure about that, let me know. But here we now have the start of a melody using chord tones, right? So if we mute our chord progression, we've got very simply, and let's say we just extend this out. The moment we're in half notes, we're not going to stay long like that, but let's just say that's what we've got right now. And if we play the harmony as well, we'll turn off some of this other stuff over here. Okay, so using chord tones, good place to start. And if you've got an interesting root note of each of those chords, you can very much build also root notes. What we want is, we just looked a moment ago, well, now we can kind of do all sorts of stuff to spice this up a bit. And so let's say, even for a second, we're going to do a bit of copy and pasting here. I like to kind of do that. So we're going to have these all stitched together for a second. So melodic wise, we've got a progression going on, but obviously it's very, very vanilla, and there's nothing going on particularly special at the moment other than the flow of it with the harmony. That's all we've got, and we're in chord tones. So let's start by saying, okay, let's kind of get a bit of a different grid in the background. Let's chop it up. So we're going to go down to, let's say we can see 16th notes here, or 8th notes perhaps, right? So now we've got kind of 8th notes of all of these, like so. Okay, so maybe we do something like, we've got all chord tones that belong to our chord progression below. We've chosen some of those, and again, we can revoice them. This D could be either an F, okay, that's in the chord here, or it could be an A. As I said, sorry, grab the wrong note there, put that back. Or it could be an A. So if we want to carry the A to the A, we could do that. This could be an E, a C, or a G, right? So at the moment we're using the C. So if we had that, very simple. But now we're repeating the A. So if we don't want to repeat the A, well, we can, as I said, go back up to the D, and now we've got a bit more of a melody going on. And if I put this A up here, it's kind of falling, isn't it? So that could be interesting as well. So I'm still using an A, but I'm kind of putting it up an octave. All right, so now let's kind of like play around a bit with some interesting kind of rhythm and stuff in here. Nakshatra, I really admire the way you create music live. It's super inspiring. I'm 16, and what mistakes do you think I should avoid, watch out for in the future, and try to avoid? Ooh, I mean, that would be quite a long question to answer. I mean, here we are in melody, and we're definitely looking at what is good to do when you're writing melody and what's best to avoid. But maybe I'll do a Q&A video one day, and you can ask me that, and then we can sort of talk about all different kind of topics and stuff if you like. Let me know if you'd like to see something like that. But I think there are many things that you want to learn. What could you do today? Just start making music, start trying to learn, if you're in Ableton Live, how to use the DAW, get really comfortable with the software and how to work in it. Any struggles, frustrations, you want to get past those, and you want to put in the time making music. You just need to give it your love, care, attention, hours, and work. All right, so over the first chord, we've got this A. So let's say we kind of make a little small loop for a second, just on that. And also, we're just going to pop up here. And let's also loop the first chord here. So all we're going to try and do is kind of have a little bit of a rhythm on this. And we could also change our note lengths as part of that. Okay, so now we've got something a bit more unusual, or not unusual, but different to what we had before. We've used so we've got something, the chords going away under there, they're glued together by the fact that these notes are chord tones, so these A's live in our chord below. They're part of the chord that's playing below it. So we're in good shape, we're using a chord tone, and we've just built a bit of a custom rhythm to it. Let's also, because we didn't play it in, let's make sure it's got a little bit of character. So we're going to randomize the velocity of those notes, and we're going to bring them, the value up a little bit, so it's not super strong. So a little bit less than it is when it's maxed out there. So now we've got a bit of more vibe there. Nice. Okay, so let's move on to the second chord. So let's pop up to our chord progression, open up chord 2, and do the same in our melody clip. And maybe I'll start on beat here with the second note. So that comes in on the beat there, and it's loud, it's quite strong because I haven't adjusted the velocity on it yet. Let's then copy that over a bit. And let's take these 3 notes here and let's randomize those. And I'm going to leave this one strong because it's really accenting is what that's called, and that's making that interesting because it's making that particular note there stronger. So it's kind of telling me where that kind of part of the melody changes, right? Let's maybe have a bit of drums to go with this for a little bit of context. And maybe, I think I'll shorten this note perhaps. Lengthen this one. Nice. So we've got this kind of nice little bit of a flow. Again, we're just in the piano, so we've got lots of rooms to kind of move this into synths and things like that in a moment. So let's carry on. The key thing we're doing here is we're building a melody from scratch over our chords in our chord progression, and we're sticking to chord tones. We are using the melodies being built from one of these notes in the chord. And ideally, as I said, one option is to use all the root notes of all the chords. We're not doing that because we've got a voiced chord progression that only does A's and G's in the bottom. So we're kind of accessing some of the thirds and the fifths, but they're all in the chords. We've not used any notes outside of that. I know I'm banging on about that, but we'll see why as we move along here a bit. Okay, so back up to the chords. Let's open those up to chord 3 and carry on. Now I could do copy and pasting here, but I'm kind of treating each section by itself. Similarly, got to randomize my velocity as I go, keeping that kind of like it's been played. Okay, maybe we chop this one a bit. And what I'm also doing here, and this is really another thing for your melodies, I'm playing with space. So I'm not just filling it up, right? So all of these little rests here that are happening in between, they are part of the melody. So we're sort of seeing that rhythm is important. Rhythm is the different note lengths and where these notes are playing. This one's on beat. It's falling where we've got the start of a bar. We've got 3 bars here at the moment. And so we're sort of getting this kind of interesting rhythm going. So right now we don't really have any repetition, right? Repetition in this melody would be, let's say that we do that now. Let's grab what we did in the first bar and finish that over here, but on this note, right? So this is a G. So we're going to bring these guys down to the G. like so, and we're going to mute that note. That's not going to be in there. So we have repeated a part. And if we wanted, we could have repeated that, right, twice. So we've got a bit of an interesting melody because we've got a little bit of repetition, but we've also got variation just in here. A2K77, just, yeah, I'm trying to get a melody that follows the chord tones and the chord progression, but it has rhythm, because rhythm is a really key thing to a strong melody as much as the pitches are, right? So this is an interesting melody because it's got variety in it. So as I said, now we've got a little bit of repetition, but we've also got variety. Let's have a listen, see what we got. Let's also, we know the velocity is already there because of this. Okay, this needs a little work. Let's have a little bit of a bass line for context as well. So that melody feels quite nice, and what we can do, let's do a test here. So we like shootouts on this channel where we can kind of do a little comparison here. So this is what we've just been working on. Yeah, so A2K77, it's really about, first of all, really just making, really banging on quite hard that rhythm is so important to a melody. I'm not sure if you're here when I did the Darth Vader Imperial March a moment ago, which was just showing that if you play that sequence of pitches, which is the Imperial March from Star Wars, and you don't play the rhythm that's a part of it, you don't really have a distinguishable melody. So rhythm is as important as the pitch, and I can't reinforce that enough. So we have got interesting rhythm here, note lengths, as well as the pitches, which happen to be chord tones. That's what we've done here in this first round. And the piano is keeping things super neutral. If you're not a fan of piano and you want to feel a bit like, oh, hey, okay, I'm writing electronic music, I want a synth, well, I would also say a handy tip would be, instead, you could just have a sine wave, like wavetable. You're just trying to keep it very simple so that the melody has the character that you're looking for. It's about keeping, for the starting point, you're not sound designing, you're trying to write a really good melody. That's what you're trying to do in the very beginning. I'm going to switch it back to a piano for a moment. So what was I going to do on the shootout? I'm going to come down to this clip. It's exactly the same as what we've done so far. And what I'm going to do is, what's the root notes here? I think we had 2 A's and 2 G's. So let's put all of this on the A. Okay, like this. And what does that mean? So here's another tip. These are all like good little tips and tests, right? So if you're writing a melody and you're very comfortable doing all the pitches, all of the good stuff, like, you know, moving up and down through all the different pitches and things, but you're not so good about understanding the rhythm part of the melody, well, if you put everything on one pitch, what we're going to hear now is the rhythm of this melody. And like I said, if we wanted to, it's already a bit more complex than just boring that melody. If we copied it down again, and let's give ourselves another color here. And so we'll just number this as well too. So on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this second section of the melody. Let's just make a note that we need a C and a G. So I'm going to delete that, and we're going to copy this over like so. And we're going to go from C and G, right? If I remember correctly. Let me just check that. I should pay attention. Yeah, C and G. Okay. Right. So on this one, we're going to have repetition, right? So we're going to come down here to the C there, and this one down to the G. Okay. Right down there. Make sure on the G. So this one, we've got a melody that's going to repeat itself, but it's playing different pitches, right? So on this clip, so the rhythm's a bit more predictable, right? Because we've got the same rhythm happening in the first two bars is repeated again here, but the pitch is the difference. So that could be an option. That's keeping it nice and simple. I kind of wrote my first one already with a little bit more emphasis than that. So this blue clip here is what I did, which actually has only a repetition in the final bar, the same as the first bar, right? But these are all independent rhythms, okay? Now this one we could develop a bit further as well. So maybe I might like a little bit more energy in here that is a little bit more quicker change. So we could, yeah, again, sort of maybe make that a little faster in that area there. But there's sometimes when you start doing this, the possibilities are huge. Like just changing it from a moment ago, it was more slower there because it had longer sustained notes. Now we've got a little bit more shorter, choppier notes here. It's changed the whole feeling there. So if you want to slow this whole bar down or speed it up, we can do things like that. So, but we want to keep it nice and simple. So we've taken our chords, all of this. This is our chord progression that we built in our harmony video. We've made a melody above it using notes from within those chords called chord tones. And then we've started to develop that into a rhythm of each of those chord tones, which is what we've got here. Now I've been showing you some different sort of examples of that, right? And this again is our acid test. Anytime you want to check a rhythm of something that's got a huge pitch range of variation, put all the notes on one pitch and there's your rhythm. That's the rhythm. And so, for example, I actually like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that white clip now. We're going to copy the blue one down. That's going to be our master clip. And on this one, again, if we want to now check our rhythm again, we can come all the way down to, you know, again, whatever note, just make it a common note, that everything's going to be on that line. And that's going to give you the test of the rhythm. And therefore you can check that. Okay, so, and 2 is interesting because this one has more repetition, and maybe in some electronic tracks you kind of want this. This has bar 2s and 1s melody repeated in 3 and 4, but just on different pitches. So maybe you want more kind of consistency and you don't want as much variation as what we just heard. So the rhythm's repeated over our chords, right? And it doesn't take much. This is why I always do it in a piano or a sine wave wavetable. Coming back over to best avoid when you're writing melodies, overthinking, overcomplicating, and starting to sound design before you've got a melody. Don't even have a melody, but you might have an amazing preset on the track and you're sold by that rather than the actual sound. So if we take the piano away, or let's actually group it so we don't have to keep doing this. We'll put it in a little instrument rack and we'll throw an analog in here, or maybe a wavetable, doesn't really matter, and we'll turn off the piano, and now we can sort of say, okay, and we start, you know, building our synth sound. And then bit by bit, we might start, you know, processing it a bit. And now we know that that melody that's going on in the background there, it has substance, but the piano got us there in the first place. Same with the chords, they're super basic patch, nothing fancy there, it's just playing back the chord progression, okay? But now our melody nice, right? And that's just a simple melody that now sounds like a nice melody. Right, but if we go back and we say, hang on a second, you know, maybe we started with a bit of echo and a bit of hybrid reverb and a wavetable. If we come back, this is what it sounded like a moment ago. But the melody has a feeling, it has emotion to it, it has a nice rhythm to it, it's interesting, it's got something going on. I'm playing clip 2, which again, just to remind you, it's got the repetition of this rhythm copied here. We've still got our blue clip, which is even a bit more interesting because it does its own thing here. So it's only repeating this section again here. The rhythm, pitch is different. Yeah, so, you know, I would go and sound design my synth in a moment, but I've got my melody nicely worked out from the piano. It's fitting with my chords. Let's bring the chords back in, and then we can move on to how we could maybe elevate this a bit further. So again, with the chords over here, maybe do something a bit similar with our chord progression. We'll put this in a rack. This current instrument that we've got on here, again, it's just an Ableton preset called Bells and Thin Pad, if you like the way that sounds. Let's add another kind of like pad in here so we can change the sound of it perhaps, so we don't get bored with that, but it's still the same chord progression. Right, so let's have a look at what else we can do. So we're working on our chord progression from our harmony video. That's our friend over here. I just realized actually I hadn't unlooped the whole chord progression. So that will sound a little bit different as well actually. It was in a 3-bar loop, didn't sound bad, but now it will be even a little bit more interesting, I think. Nice. Try a different drum groove as well. See what it sounds like if we were doing house drums instead. So this particular melody, maybe it's better suited to sort of the progressive house kind of melodic techno type of sort of sound, or melodic house rather than house music, but I don't think it fits badly. But maybe if we were writing another melody, we're going to look at that in the future as we go through today's video. We're going to write some melodies for different genres. We might write this rhythm a little bit different, right? So the rhythm and the pattern kind of seems to fit to me like a bit more emotional genre, but it does work with these house drums. Doesn't sound bad to me, and with the bass, but more melodic house, I think. But also, again, a little bit because of the wavetable. So we could also change that pattern and the rhythm to do with the genre. But everything's glued together nicely. So that's our first melody over the chords, taking into account that we've written that melody using tones out of our chords. So all of these pitches belong in those chords, and we've made sure they have an interesting rhythm. So we've got good melodies have variation and repetition. Well, we've got that inside of here. We've got some repetition, 2 bars do the same pattern, and we've got variation as well as the pitch and the rhythm. So we're basically following this theory over here of our good melody recipe: simple, easy to sing, memorable, got some emotion in it, balancing repetition with variation, and it's complementary. That's important, not competing with the chords and the bass that we already have, right? They're fitting together. Happy days. All right, so let's say, once again, we're now going to grab, we're still writing over existing chords. That's what we're doing just at the moment. So we've got our existing chord progression. We're going to do some melodies in a bit from scratch with no chords. So we looked at over existing chords, chord tones and passing tones. We haven't looked at passing tones. We wrote our first melody here using only chord tones. We looked at starting on the roots. That's where, as I said, you make your melody using just the roots of the chords. In my case, because the chords are voiced quite smoothly, the roots are A's and G's, that's all. So I chose to use some of the other notes out of the chords. They're still from the chords though, right? I know I'm repeating myself, but hopefully it helps to lodge these things in. We don't really have any leaps or steps too much. It's also a fairly smooth melody, so we can look at that in a moment. Accented passing note on the beat we have, which was something I also did in here, and that is this one that lands right on the start of bar 2, and it happens to be in the velocity section down here, almost the loudest note, right? It is the loudest note in the melody. It's up there, okay? And that's deliberate. So that's accenting that note. If we go even further, it stands out, right? If we put the piano back in, all right, you really hear this. So a good little trick is to also try that, accenting highlight. Think about putting a highlighter pen through a note. You're putting the velocity up on that. That's highlighting a note that's landing on the beat. Okay, so we start on the roots. We've used chord tones. Let's now go back over here, and we're going to open things up a bit. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create another melody from scratch. And we're going to use, we can leave the notes that we chose from the chords. These are chord tones. So this is our starting template again. So let's copy that down. But what we're going to do now is think about that if we're working in a key like A minor, then if I turn on my scale down here, then everything that we see as purple is also the notes in A minor, right? So the chords we were using are using 3 notes out of the scale. They're triads, but we have all these other notes available to us as well. So this time we're going to write a melody using chord tones and what are called passing tones. So we've got sort of the glue of the notes that are in the chords, and now we're going to use any note from outside of the scale, in the scale, but not within the chord. So I hope I'm making sense. So actually what we could do, we can save ourselves a little bit of work here. If we like our rhythm already down here, there's no reason we can't bring that back up. It's the same thing, it's just with the rhythm attached to it. And so what we might do here now is we're going to remember this is our chord progression down here. It's our template, so we can see what's muted, right? That's our chords. So we can see that. We've got A involved here. So why don't we maybe have the G dropping from the A to the G and then down to the D there. So we're now taking a note that isn't in this chord and we're saying, okay, let's go E, G, and maybe not even all of it. And maybe not the G, maybe the F. Or the E. But the E's in the chord, right? Actually quite like that, going up. So essentially, looking outside of the chord, in the chord over on the progression, we're playing A, C, E. So we know we've got B available to us, the D, the F, the G, right? So B is one, the D could be another. And we could do rising or falling. Okay, so actually that might also work really nicely. So another possibility here is to drop down to the D, which is then going to move nicely into our next chord, right? So outside of this chord, but it's leading us to the next chord. So I think I'll go with that actually, rather than that jump up. Okay, so over to the chord in bar 2 and the melody. We're on all the Ds, which is a chord tone, it's the third. So again, if we're doing a passing note, we could take something from outside of that and kind of, we might use it again towards the end of the theme. So perhaps we'll look at, what have we got? We could again do similar to what I've done with the D. We could come down to the C before, but maybe we'll look for a little bit more spice. So let's say we go up to the E for a second. So it's even a bit more spice. So we've got a little bit of the C and a little bit of the E, just moving our melody a bit, and both those notes are not in my chord. So they're passing tones. They're accessing notes in our scale, our 7-note scale, and we're saying let's use chord tones and let's use passing tones. All right, so again, we could keep some of this repetition, or we can keep going. So I think this could be nice if we go right up to the A. See what it sounds like. And the reason for that is I'm kind of tying the end here back around to the start here, which I thought could work well. And again, it's not in my chord below, okay? The G here could perhaps sort of make its way towards the A. So we could have a little kind of flurry here. So that's another way we can do our melodies over chord progressions. We can start to mix chord tones with other notes from the scale, but we're kind of keeping it not too crazy here, like as in, again, stepwise, which is where we're sort of moving. We're not doing any crazy leaps, right? We're kind of nicely moving up here. We're kind of moving down here. I mean, this was a little bit of a jump. We could take that away if we don't want that, but we're kind of moving down here. So it's all kind of nice and smooth. There's nothing like what I'm talking about is if we're kind of up here, right? That might sound good, but you know, that's obviously very different to what we've got at the moment. So if we put the E up there, it can sound really nice. Maybe we roll with that, right? Quite like that. And maybe if we come out of this chord with a non-chord note, I think I'll keep it on the C. Okay, let's try again our test from moving from the piano over to the wavetable. Yeah, something like that I think works quite well. What if I even take this away? Maybe too strong. Just make it like that, and we'll just go a bit lower. Velocity. So, passing tones and chord tones. Nice. We've got again a bit more sort of spice in that melody. Once again, if we sort of like look for variation repetition inside of that melody that we've just written, let's have a little bit of an analysis of it. So we can kind of see here that we, again, really have a lot of variation in it. We're not really repeating anything. Of course, if we duplicate this over, we could carry the same melody across and then we would be repeating 4 bars. But we've got quite a lot of variation in it. If we didn't want that, so we definitely don't have an issue with boring and lots of repetition, right, is what I'm sort of going to be explaining here. We've got rhythm, pitch, chord tones, passing tones, a very unique and interesting melody here built out of those two things. If we wanted to simplify it a bit, maybe we go to the 2 up here, copy that up. And that is repetition. So we have the same pattern in the first 2 bars as we do in the second, just different pitches. So this would be more kind of like, let's say, glued. Lots of more repetition, double the repetition. And then we can work on these, just spicing those up with a bit of passing notes out of the chord tones. And let's say we go repetition, we're staying in the same position. We even go for the same position as the other note with a passing note. So maybe you would like more glue, right? Maybe you want that this pattern of rhythm here is again happening here, that we're doing the same move except for the pitch. And again, these 2 notes now are not in either of the chords below. So, but they are in our scale, and that's what we're accessing there. Okay, so that is a different pattern, more repetitive, but still with variation, which is nice. And this one has a lot more. So once again, we're kind of catering for different genres and different situations. Maybe we want like a sort of, you know, less crazy melody, something that's more kind of like very, very getting close to a riff like what we've got here. But let's now sort of get ourselves a little organized here. Let's put this 2 down here. Let's put this down on top of it. Let's give it a different color. So these two are a partnership, let's say. This one is with passing tones. So notes from the scale, but not in the chords. And this one is just chord tones, but the same rhythm and variation in them. This one is our brand new melody up here. This one is the melody with passing and chord tones. So a little bit of housekeeping so I know what's going on. This is also, just to check, that is the other melody with just chord tones. Because that way we can do always like little comparisons as well and see what sounds what, and you might sort of discover that you have a preference to one or the other. And this is the test again, the little tip about checking the rhythm of your melodies by putting everything on the same pitch. That's how we can identify bass lines, chord progressions, melodies. If you want to check the rhythm of something, just put all the notes on one pitch and then you can put it back into the shape of the melody. But this gives us the rhythm of the piece. So if I move this around, I'm going to undo what I just did there. So if I do that, it's a different rhythm, shifting it to the right or here. That's actually quite nice, that rhythm right there. It's more riffy. So if you're making a house track, that actual riff that's playing now here, the rhythm, the pitches, not the pitches, the rhythm, sorry. If we put the piano back on this, so that's all the rhythm of those notes, right? And we took the pitch away. But if we then started to put this rhythm into context in pitch, so we've got, let's say, A's from the chord tones here. These we could be in D or F if we like. So let's go up to the D, that's in our chord. And then this one, we could be C, E, or G if we're in the chord. So now we could pitch it to C, that's just one tone away there. And then with our final one here, we could be E, B, or G. So maybe we are going with the B and we've got a bit of a pattern there. And then we might take the A and pop it up here. And then we're sort of moving downwards through those, but we're keeping that new rhythm. That sounds really nice. I like that. I like the rhythm and I like the chord tones, the progression, right? Maybe we try the A down. But then we're jumping up to that D. That's nice. I really like the C down to the B. And this could also be an F. So here's somewhere where you might do a little change, or you might add a passing note, or you might bring that up to connect. So we can put a note from the scale, or we could put a note from outside, sorry, from the key. That's in the chord tone, it's in here, we've got A. But if we use another note from the scale that's not in our chord, G would be one of those. Or B. Yeah, so that's another one from scratch there that's just come together just by changing the rhythm. Like all I did was move the whole pattern left and right, but that was coming from that one pitch trick that I showed you, which, as I said, is getting anytime you're unsure about the rhythm you've got going on in your melody, then just bring everything to one pitch, and then you are listening to your rhythm. Right, little trick for that. Okay, so our little friends in the middle there, but we come up with some nice ideas here. So we've got more than enough, I think, of the passing tones and chord tones and combinations of them over our chords. So we are addressing the chords we wrote in last week's harmony video, this chord progression here, and then we are now building a melody over the top of it. So chord tones, passing tones, hopefully that's clear. If you're not sure, do feel free to drop questions in the chat. I'll do my best to answer them. Also say hello. Let us know where you're tuned in and listening from. I hope you're having a great Sunday, and I hope you're enjoying the video and learning something about melody. All right, so starting on the roots we've looked at, starting on any chord tone we've looked at, adding a passing note, accenting a passing note in the beat we've looked at. Pedal tones, okay, let's do that. Let's also look at a sequence. So that's the next two things we want to maybe take a look at here. All of this, by the way, applies to melodies in general. We are currently writing one over our chords, so we're tying some things into that. But all of the things I'm showing you, if you're writing melodies, then most of these things, such as how critical rhythm is, that's the same for every melody. Chord tones, you're not going to have unless you've already got a chord progression right. Passing tones, the way I just showed them, are not going to really be the same either, because they're just notes from the scale that are outside of your chords. But things like rhythm, as I said, are the same whether you're writing from scratch or not. Steps and leaps, tension with the harmony, we want to look at all of this as well. Bring that down there. Demois Demoni, I hope I said that all right, aka Dr. Bones. Well, that was a bit more easier, the Dr. Bones part. A very good afternoon to you. All right, so let's bring all this down a wee bit, like so. Let's look at a pedal tone. So we just kind of had this clip here. That's my favorite actually so far, that has more or less, just to break it down again for you, it's more or less just all chord tones, right? All A's, they're in our chord. All F's, they were at the top note of the chord. C's, all in our chord. And B's. I like that. It's the rhythm that sold me that. And it's chord tones. No passing tones in there. No notes from outside of the chord tones. But I really like the rhythm. So I'm going to work off that one. Just really like the emotion and feeling behind it, right? So if we're working with that one and we say, let's do a pedal tone, well, a pedal tone could be where we just simply sort of take a note that's in our key and scale again. Generally, the root note could be a good choice, or the choice, which is the A, and then we might just have that A pedaling on the A alongside our chords, alongside our melody. So you could be doing something just like that sort of thing across. And it can be above or below. Let's bring some velocity into it. Make it a bit softer. If you just joined the video now, remember my tip. I'm working with the piano because I'm trying to sell the melody, feel the emotion, get my rhythm, get my pattern that is a melody before I start working with synths and presets and effects and all that good stuff. It's why I'm deliberately working with the piano. And sometimes you end up keeping the piano because it sounds great on the piano, and you end up with a piano in your track. It's happened to me a few times that way around. So rather than sound designing your melody, you're designing your melody in a traditional music sense before you start adding things like a synth. Let's knock off our pedal tone. Quite different, right? You get used to that. We got used to that being in there and working. Now we take it away. It's different. Still think I would like to bring them down a little bit softer. Check our pedal tones again, take them out. So it's a bit quieter now because I turned them down a bit, so let me put them back up a bit. So we get that balance there. Nice, right? So pedal tones, that's what that's all about. It's adding that little bit of glue again to that melody that we've got. Now we need to copy that down because actually I'm going to mute the pedal tones in one, so that's going to be this one. So the top one up here, let's make again a note inside of it, doing a bit of housekeeping here, pedal tones. Let's pop that down. So pedal tones, another nice way to add a little bit of kind of glue and control to the melody that we've got, that we've written from scratch over our chords. Now, sometimes I'll do this. Here's another tip. So my pedal tone is currently here over my melody. I'm pedaling an A, and it's a 16th note. Again, that could be a different pattern to that. You can go and make a whole different pedal tone to what we've got here. We're just doing straight 16th note A's. That's very simple. And I've just played with the velocity. But sometimes, instead of the pedal tone being there in the melody, right, with the melody on that particular track, you might have, like I have over here, a bass in your track that's just on a C. So here's my bass line that we're listening to, and it's also just a pedal tone. It's just the C, pedaling on the C. There's no pitch in it. There's no fancy notes going up and down in pitch in the scale. So that's actually acting like a pedal tone as well to the chords and to the melody. So if we were to let's see if we can do this a bit here. For sure we can. So if we take this clip over here, put it over that side there, let's bring that track in a bit. Yeah, if I can grab it, there we go. Should work, not quite. There we go, let's do it that way, just so I can get the edge of it. Okay, and then we want another one with that over there. This will make sense in a second. Because we could do this in the session view of Ableton, we can kind of make things so that we can kind of see the overlap, right? So let's give these some pretty strong colors, some of the brighter colors that we have in Ableton. And we're going to open up the bass clip, hold shift on our keyboard, and bring them all into the mix. And then we can turn off focus if we like. And that's what's going on, right? So there is our melody, let's zoom out a bit, our bass and our chords and a pedal tone. So if we were to take that tone away, as you can see, the bass is kind of acting like a pedal down the bottom below the chords. And the chords of the melody, they sort of overlap just in here. That's why it's behind. So if we were to bring up the green and put that in focus, there is an overlap there, but otherwise we're sort of getting separation between the two. Just checking in the chat, Dr. Bones, it's funny how when it's just a piano and the current pattern seems a bit much, but then switching to the wavetable and making some adjustments change it wildly and creates fit in the whole track. Absolutely, but I think you want to write on the piano, as I said, or a simple synth with a sine wave or something like that, so you get your feeling of the melody. What are you trying to do? And then you worry about sound designing. And I know, like, I can take any of these clips and melodies and really transform them and take them somewhere nice, but I've still got my melody deep down in there. All right, so that was just to show you how we can overlay everything and see what's going on. So like I said, you might have the pedal tone actually in the bass. Okay, that's what that sort of concept was about. And that's doing the pedal tone down in the bass. So right now we've got bass, house drums, change back over drums. We've had the house drums for a while. Let's have the progressive ones. With our pedal bass. Then we'll have our melody. And I see that I have to recover something actually, because I did do one thing that didn't work there, which was one of my option drags didn't work. So we're gonna have to come back and get this guy, because otherwise we're in trouble, because that is drag it where I want to drag it. Come on. There we go. Over there. I want to put that back there because that is the chords we're working on so far. From the previous video, by the way, harmony video, if you haven't seen that one, then there was before that the bass video, and then before that there was a rhythm video. So this whole series, electronic music producer theory for beginner friendly. We're not going crazy yet. Every time I've done one of these videos, I've realized there could be a part 3, 4, and 5 comfortably. So hopefully get your heads around this, and then we work from there into more technical territories. Right, so progressive drums, bass, melody, chords, pedal tones with the melody. I still really like that. Even with my bass pedaling, I'm quite happy with the pedal tone also in the melody. So we've got a melody with nice feeling in it. And it's with a pedal tone. Right, so moving on from that. We're covering lots of ground here, writing over our chords from the harmony lesson. Let's move all of this down a bit so we've got some more room. Keep on going down there. Nice. Okay, right up the top here, we can get rid of that. That was where we sort of began today. We've kind of moved on from there. That was just grabbing ourselves some chord tones and then starting from there. So we've kind of been cracking on with that. So now if we talk about a sequence copied to all chords, what are we talking about there? Well, let's do that. Let's do a copy over of the chord progression. We'll do it from scratch. Over to here. Here's our template. Okay, and we're going to go from the chord progression to a melody, and we're getting lots of practice in here. Let's maybe say again that we start with the chord tones. So let's get down the grid down to say 16th notes I'd quite like to play with. So I'm going to have 16th notes over this chord, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bit of a sequence here. So let's have a repeating sort of pattern. And we could use all chord tones. That would be C, A, C, and E. Okay. So let's say we do that sequence, and then we're going to copy that sequence across here, but we're going to change the pitches to be A is in there, but we need the D. So one of these is going to move, so that can go up to the D, and then the top one can go to the F. Okay, so up into there, give me an F. Sound like I'm on Wheel of Fortune or something. Let's move that across. Again, what have we got in this chord? We've got the G, so we want a G in this note here, so dropping it down. And we've got the C in the middle there, which is right there. And then we've got finally on the top of there an E. Okay, so we're actually nearly there, down there to there, and then one more time across. And what we've got here, we've got another A, I think, sorry, G, so we're good to go there. We've got the B in the middle, so we need to move this one from the C down to the B. Nice. And then at the top here, E. It could have been maybe easier for me to actually have just copied the chords up and broken them up into parts, but I've just kind of drawn the sequence and then copied it across. So now this sequence is repeating chord tones in this little pattern over the top of the chords. Again, only chord tones, right? But it's a sequence, and it's a repeating sequence, or even an arpeggio broken up. We could think about it either way, or a sequence of notes, right? So when you're in a sequencer or doing a sequence, you're doing something like this. I've done it by hand. Let's get some velocity into there. So that's all randomized up a little bit, and let's hit play. Let's get maybe the piano again for a moment. So interesting rhythm because of the pattern. This has lots of repetition. It has the same rhythm and the same sequence, right? We're breaking up the chord progression, the chord tones below. They've been broken up. There they are there. So if we kind of were to unmute them, they would be there. That's the chords that we're building this melody on top of, right? So we're basically, as I said, got this kind of rhythm that's pattern that's repeating over and over and over, lots of repetition. So we could quite easily, again, spice this up a bit quite a few ways. So everything I've shown you so far, pedal tones, passing notes, are all fair game, right? So if we copied this down, we could now sort of zoom in a little bit, and we could say, okay, well, what about if we start with a variation using some notes that are in the scale of A minor, which is our theme, but are not inside the chords, right? We know these are our chord tones, so as soon as we do that, we are using a note in the scale. We can also turn on scale if we like, so we can kind of see, but it's all the white notes here, and we're starting to use other notes that are in the scale but not in our chords. That started to give me goosebumps a bit when I got the change of that oscillator. More emotion. more interest, right? Because now we're sound designing a bit what we have here. But the point being that getting out of wavetable and sound design land, we're back in our piano knowing that we've written a cool melody. And we've just spiced this very simple sequence. So I started with the chord tones only across the board here, turned it into this little pattern, and added now some other notes from outside the scale, out there in the scale, but they're outside of the chord, right? And it's sort of connected the dots to all this. Once again, if we copy this clip down and we play with rhythm, then we would be taking all of this. And if we do something like, we could change the rhythm in sections, but we could also do the whole thing, and we could move it across a bit, perhaps. Sorry, let's step back. Well, that's all about syncopation. And it's changing the rhythm of the pattern. So we could actually kind of take this section here, copy that, put that back around here. So I'm just sort of showing you ways you can kind of like take what the raw materials and vary it up as well. Right, so sequence copied to all chords over the chords. So that's what we've done there. And hopefully you're seeing lots of little tricks here to get a melody going over existing chords and taking these things into account. Passing tones, chord tones. So passing tones, notes from in the scale, outside of our chord tones, notes in the chord, sequencing over the top of them. We've got lots of different variations and interesting stuff here. So I think we can move along, but in the sense of, like I said, we could do many parts of this video. I wanted to keep all this series kind of beginner friendly, and so I'm not going into crazy amounts of ways that we could vary what we've just started. So as I said, like that sounded okay. This one sounded okay, which was my first attempt at sequencing, just using the chords, and then we sort of took it to the next level. And yeah, as I said, it's kind of, sorry, that was the first one, so it should be like this: 1, 2, and then 3. Sometimes getting a bit lost in the system, right? So that was the first attempt sequencing. Over the chords, passing tones, notes in the scale outside of the chords, and then new rhythm. All adding really, really nice details in their own rights. So I think in terms of writing over a chord progression, I think we've got hopefully a good handle for some really good tips for doing that. How important is rhythm? So if we just go back again to our little cheat sheet where we started, good melodies are simple and easy to sing. Think of nursery rhymes, you can hum them. Like, okay, if we take away the wavetable and the sound design, because we've moved on to that, you know, I could find myself whistling this, I'm sure. And if we slow the tempo down, you know, it's whistleable. It's kind of, you know, whether you're humming or whistling, you've got a feeling for what you've written. Piano's the acid test, right with the piano, switch to the sound design later. So good melodies can be hummed, sung, nice and easy. They're memorable. They might have emotion in them. They balance repetition versus variety. That's super important. We've looked at that as we've gone along. Too repetitive, boring. Too much variety equals chaos. We want somewhere in between. Because we've been writing over our chords, we are 100% paying attention to complementary and not competing. We don't want our melody competing with our bass and our chords. We want it all to come together into a beautiful kind of conversation between everything. Adrian Dantas, a very good afternoon to you, and nice to see you here in the stream. I prefer the other patch for some reason. Either a piano reminds me of Latin music. Yeah, that's fine. What we're doing, Adrian, is the piano is the way to write the melody and feel it and get the emotion before you switch it to your favorite preset, synth, whatever. It's a real massive tip. You can do whatever you like, but if you start sound designing, you're not writing your melody. And that's the reason for the piano, by the way. It's not that we want to keep the piano. It's that, well, we could, but it's there for helping us understand what our melody sounds like before we jump to all the best synths and instruments and on things. So that's the idea behind that. So let's put our BPMs back up a bit. And we'll just go through what we've got here. Sequence over chords. Simple sequence over the chords, chord tones. Sequence over chords with notes, chord tones and passing tones, notes from the scale outside of the chords. New rhythm. Work we were doing before. Simple melody. That simple melody with pedal tones on the top. And again, if you struggle listening to a piano for too long, the other option, which I often do, is just simply grab any of Ableton's synths, drop them in, and then literally just keep it in a sine wave, or if you like, put it to the sawtooth, and you just listen to it that way. It's just to get, sawtooth, sine wave more neutral. It's just again to feel out your melodies. Maybe a triangle for a little bit more. So if we go through all these, there is quite a lot to go through. I'm just going to see if I can pick my favorite in here. Is it just remembering which one was which, as I said, because we got quite a lot. Yes, I feel like, was it the pink one? No, that's the rhythm test. Okay, perfect. Getting myself back on track here. It's actually this one. I just like the movement of this one. So now if we put it with a synth that's been a little bit sound designed, wasn't our first thing we did, we suddenly get this. So this would be kind of my, I guess, favorite feeling out of what I've written over the chords, but also these sequence ones I think work quite well as well. Because it's simple, like a bit of an arpeggio almost. Okay, all right, so let's crack on. Just checking in the chat. Got it. It's easier to assess results with a piano. Bang, you got it, Adrian Dantas. That's the idea. Just trust me. Give it a try and see how you get on. But it's in the end, when we're writing chord progressions and music and basses, a lot of people go down the rabbit hole of sound design or have an amazing preset on the track and their melody, if I can use the phrase, it sucks. It's not a melody, it's a few notes and you've got all these effects and a synth whizzing away, but you don't really hit your listener or dancer or target with any sort of particular nice melody that you might be aiming for, or exciting rhythm or riff or something, because your judgment is clouded because you're sound designing before. So we had that here. Best avoid overthinking. Sound designing before you've got a melody, in this case, because there's a melody video, and stuck in a loop and something's boring, well, hopefully you could see that we made a lot of variations of stuff, and this is beginner friendly. We haven't even sort of pulled out all the tricks in the bag that we have. So keeping our chord progression, because that's kind of over there, let's kind of just do a bit of tidying up here so I know where I am. We are going to say that this track now, which has been the melody over chords, we are done with for the moment. And again, if you have any questions about that, there was something that I did that you weren't sure about, please do let me know, and I will let you know the answer to that. So melody over chords, we're going to send across. We've got just some over here, some drums and some bass and stuff as we go along. The harmony, we don't really need now, but we might try it later. So that's our chords from previous. So now we are going to open up a new section here, and that's going to be from scratch, right? So now we're going to write without any chords going on in the background, and we might write for a couple of different genres, right? So we're going to drop in a new MIDI track, and we're going to say, okay, what about we're doing something sort of like, I don't know, I think we've kind of had something a little bit trancey already. So maybe we do something like, I mean, I do have a bass that's very flexible, reason I've got the bass line that I have. So maybe we do something like a house melody that goes over the top of a house beat, right? So we can even knock off the bass for a moment. And we're going to bring the piano back, sorry to say, but maybe we're going to have a piano kind of idea of a bit of a hook here. And we're going to go from scratch. So all we're going to do is we're going to say that we're going to use a scale. And we're going to, let's say we're writing from scratch and we're writing for a house track and we're going to do a piano hook. That's the sort of goal here against our 4/4 beat. Syncopation is going to be important. We'll look at that in a moment. But let's say we want to begin with the rhythmic idea, the motif as it's called. Then we can kind of find the emotion. And I've got some tips and stuff for like ways you could write a melody from scratch. We sort of looked at in the harmony video that if you use a pentatonic scale, you can even think about like the black notes on your keyboard. All the black keys on the keyboard are a scale and they are pentatonic. If you start from the E, it's minor pentatonic. So if you start from E flat, which is the black key here, so if we look at the piano roll, and we see where we are, let's turn that off. So you can see here I'm on that black key. So I'm going up through that scale, that's E flat pentatonic and it's minor. And then if you do from the G up here until the G again, that is G major pentatonic. So there's two pentatonic scales, minor and major, just playing black keys only, just depending if you start on the G, that's then major pentatonic, and you start on the E, that's minor pentatonic. Both of those scales, easy, right? Just 5 notes to work with. So if we're only writing in the E minor one, we've got this note, this note, this note, this note, and that note to play for before we trigger the next octave below or above, right? So we're going back through notes. And a little trick we used to do before we have a lot of the fancy tools enabling, you can still do it here, is draw in all the notes like that and then just hit left arrow and you can put them outside of the piano roll, and now you can kind of see you've got a map there of like the notes that are available to you, right? So let's say again we're looking for a piano sort of hook here. We've gone pentatonic, so we've only got 5 notes to worry about. And we try and write something. So by going to 5 notes, it's going to be a very pleasing melody because the 2 notes that get sort of turfed out, sorry, you're not welcome, in the pentatonic are the 2 notes that generally in a white note scale or a scale with 7 notes, sorry, they'll have a little bit more tension to them. Generally, if you pick pentatonic, you're going to get a more smoother sounding scale right off the bat. So rhythm is the key here. Okay, great. So we need to put into practice what we looked at earlier, which is we're going to be really messing around a lot with note lengths and things like that. So let's start with just the Ds only to get our rhythm of our house piano. And I like a small grid because then I can access like little notes. You know, 16th grid or smaller, you know, it's going to allow you to access certain notes. So let's maybe go for a bit of a classic kind of melody here first, or rhythm, should I say. So all these notes are syncopated. If they're like that, they're landing on the beat, right? So we looked at this in our rhythm video. We're over here. So let's start with this sort of position and then make some little tweaks. It's already pretty catchy, right? So I'm just working on the rhythm here. Maybe we bring our grid smaller. We turn this into a and silence is as handy as is a note being there. We got this one, I think. And then I want to get the velocity into this. So this note might be really low, just so you feel it. But all the other notes as well, I want all of those. So I'm just going to select them all. And I want to get some randomization. Right, so we've got our rhythm all on one pitch, but that melody, if we don't have that rhythm, it's not going to have the character that it has now, right? So if we move this rhythm around, let's copy this clip down, our house piano hook, let's bring it down, and let's play with that pattern and shift the timing. So that's quite nice as a variation. So is that, right? So there's lots of little changes there. So coming back, we could have this as a new section of the track, or it could be the second bar. So the first bar plays the first melody we had, and then it moves to this melody. But as you can see, just moving those notes around, we're getting different rhythms. I think we've got already a bit of a piano hook, right? Just on the rhythm, and if we drop our bass in, let's see if we prefer the second rhythm. Maybe the second one, I prefer it. Where I moved it left and right. So now we could do a little bit of pitch change, and we've got these notes we could be working with, right? We could also, by the way, as I said, this was an old school kind of technique that we did before we had all these fancy tools we have these days in Live 12. So we could put on E as our key, and then we would be looking for minor pentatonic here, and we should see more or less, although we're not quite getting the same thing, because we want actually E flat. We want this, and now you can see we line up nicely, so you can kind of remove those over there if you want. But I kind of like seeing the notes on the other side of the piano roll, old school thing that we used to do. We don't hear these, but we kind of see they're the notes that we're working with, and that's one octave, right? So it's one octave, so we can go up and down in the octaves here. So let's say that we now spice this up a little bit with some of the scale. And let's also, in the new clip, duplicate it, so we start working with 2 bars, not just one. Yeah, so we don't want to jump around. You can hear like, so just experimenting, my rhythm stays the same, but I'm starting to get sort of like, you know, between repetition and variation, really big jumps here, and it's not kind of sounding too smooth or too nice, right? So we probably only going to move sort of small amounts of notes rather than large amounts of notes, let's say. So we could stay pedaling on the D, but we can sort of bring in some little sort of movements, or we can also turn them into yeah, I don't really want that sticking out there. I kind of like this. So I'm going to repeat that here. So I've got my little motive. That's a little pattern that I want to repeat. Maybe we could do something like lengthen. That's a little bit different in this second phrase. So this is kind of cool. So if we duplicate this across, what we might do is with this little motive we've got going on then here. So this is a little motive, this little block of 3 notes here is kind of turned into something that's nice and it's kind of repeating. So we've got a bit of variation with that longer note now. The rhythm's cool. We've got our scale in the background that we're paying attention to at the moment in terms of the pitches that we're working with. So maybe what we'll try is with our little motive here, what happens if we go over to Ableton and we use over in the clip envelope here the invert. So we're going to do that. What does that sound like? Kind of nice, right? That could be happening here or where we've got it. So now we've got an extra little bit of change in there. So I do love using this invert feature, by the way. It's a great little way to kind of like, you know, take something, kind of turn it around. So yeah, you know, if you were to grab all of this, you could do that. This won't be my choice though. But you know, does sound interesting, but I think if we duplicate further, so we're now kind of working with 8 bars, something like that could be interesting in this second 4 bars. And maybe we'll try sort of like, you know, rising ourselves up. So I'm taking the root note and bringing it up to the top. We might try and sort of see how we're going to get from there to there. So we are going to see if we can jump up a bit perhaps. Let's see. Sticking with notes in my scale here. So this is kind of interesting, right? So I'm just kind of working with what I've got so far. So to be honest, you know, I'm going already further than we have to. We've got kind of 4 bars here that were already pretty decent as a house piano hook that incorporates rhythm, the notes of this 5-note pentatonic black key only minor scale starting on the E flat or the D sharp down there, and we've got that. And again, if we sort of work on what we were looking at before, let's say we didn't want a piano, we wanted sort of something else like maybe an organ or something along those lines. Let's again maybe pop this in a rack. So we can kind of do that, but we do like writing with a piano just to get our feel of what's going on. Let's maybe drop an operator in here. So I'm now doing my sound design a bit. I'm working on trying to take that little melody, kind of push it somewhere new. So, you know, it could be whatever synth you want, you know, or you can obviously go and grab yourself a preset from Ableton's beautiful library and start working on that. So maybe we've even got some stuff in here that I've bookmarked from there that we can sort of filter down a bit. I like making my own sounds, as you can see, but sometimes when we're doing this, it's a little bit kind of going to take me a little bit till I kind of get the sound I'm looking for. So that could maybe work, but that also could be interesting. Let's just check what's going on inside of this. So we might just turn off the delay. And this is also turning this into a chord, so we could, you know, we can switch all that kind of stuff off. So we're back to our melody. But this is interesting, this preset, because it'll actually take my melody. Oh, there's no chord at the bottom, by the way. Didn't see that. Now, there's one little thing here, that the bass that we've sort of been working with, it's not in my scale at all. So we need to maybe do something about that. So we need to put that note on, let's say, the root of our black note only minor pentatonic scale. We're going to go on the D there, and now it's in harmony. And we'll make sure we know which clip is which there. So give it another color. Loop it up to the longer version. Hang on a sec. Make sure we don't have that happen. So we need zeros here. We don't want a polymeter, but that would be fun, but not the aim here. Let's also try a different octave for all of this. So I've taken my melody, the rhythm behind it, the pitch, the scale, and we're getting somewhere, right? And we're sort of sound designing a bit now, because we started with this to figure out what that pattern was going to be. We've got some variation, we've got repetition, we've got lots of good things, and we're just working with this nice simple scale with a kind of little housey, tech housey lead pluck. And now we could kind of add effects to it. I've kind of turned off the built-in ones because I kind of like to take that on myself. Now we're sort of cooking, right? So like I said, the piano leads us down the path of this nice rhythm and the hook, and then we can start to take it where we want to take it. Let's get a bit of vintage sort of crunch to it. Bit of chorus as well could be nice in here. Right, so that was from scratch, right? So we started here, getting our rhythm, and we had 2 goes at it, so we got 2 different rhythms here. First go was this one actually. So that's fighting with the delay a bit, but it's still a nice rhythm. Then we can jump to clip 2. So there's 2 rhythm changes, same notes, just the D, the root note of our scale. And then we've taken that and made this clip. So let's say we were varying that further. We could go down here, and much like we've got pitch changes here, we've sort of moved up and around through the notes of the scale to get this kind of nice, like this motif for me is the winner. That's kind of what began the interest to this, the rhythm followed by that. Then we varied that a bit, and then we sort of connected the first 4 bars to the second by using other notes in the scale up here to kind of build this nice kind of rise and then fall back down. You could do lots of good things with that. We could also change like rhythm in different sections of this track, or we could slow things up or speed it down. What do I mean by that? Maybe we could go sort of here in this area here, bar 6 and 7, and we select those notes, we turn them into legato. So there they're going to be much more elongated, using sort of Ableton to help us do that. That's going to slow it down. It's going to feel like it slows down here. And then speeds up again, right? So lots of little things I've shown you here of ways you can turn interest in these sections. So I could listen to that for quite some time without getting too tired, and I'm now sort of starting to add some little bits and pieces to spice it up. So looking at the clock here, it's going to defeat me to sort of push much further past, but obviously I appreciate a lot of you for being here with me today in the stream as always, and it's been great to see some of you pop up in the chat there. A2K77 of course, Nakshatra. Sorry I didn't see that comment actually, by the way. It would be amazing to see a Q&A live stream. I'd love to ask more about your journey and getting insights on the music industry. Done. We'll fit that in at some point soon. Dr. Bones has changed his name, but that's all good. We got that. Adrian Dantas, always as good to see you as always. So let's have a little recap. We're just doing at the moment a house piano hook. So everything we've done from scratch, but today we started with, let's go back in time and just remember, what is a good melody consisting of? It's easy to sing, it's simple. Think nursery rhymes. Hans Zimmer likes to play things with one finger, love that. You should be able to hum it, whistle it, all those good things. You want a memorable or emotional and memorable melody, right? Outside of a vocal, our melody is our weapon, or either or both together, but people are going to walk out of a club or they're going to whistle your tune or remember it, hum it, and that's not normally going to come from the drums or the bass. Even though I love both those things in my tracks, it's going to come from a good melody, or it's going to come from, as I said, a vocal or both, or good harmony between all of the elements. So we also want memorable hooks. This is what we're speaking about. The emotion, if we're looking to give our listeners and audience an emotion, make them feel something. We want to balance repetition with variation. That's really important. We don't want to bore people, and we don't want too much chaos. So you've got to find the sweet spot in there. Hopefully looking at some of these last things I'm sort of showing you, unlocking a few doors of ways you can do that. Keeping it simple. We haven't gone even complicated at all today. We've tried to keep it nice and beginner friendly. Complementary, not competing. That's about everything working together. The bass, if we throw that in now, the chords, if we throw those in, the drums, it's all kind of coming together as a track, not fighting with each other, having an arm wrestle, right? So good melodies, bad melodies or melodies that suck, probably best avoiding those, and a good way to avoid melodies that suck are going to be not overthinking, overcomplicating. Keep it really simple. Those 3 notes in here are the key. So if we even do another copy of this down and we throw that in white and we go in here and we knock everything off, let's do it this way. We'll actually take everything out and then we'll just bring the motive. That's the motive. You could make it the extra note here as well if you like, but that little section there is the sort of key to the simplicity in here. The rest of the things that have sort of gone on since were about sort of taking it from being, you know, all the same all the time to a little bit more interesting. But so we conclude the 4th note there, and there's your motive. And that could be all you need, right? And 2 of these could be down an octave. Or just 1 of them. Or we could even move them to other patterns in the scale, like that. So it's still playing notes in my highlighted scale. And we can do like we did before, which was invert things. So we're flipping the pattern. Nice, I like that. Right? So that's not overcomplicating. It was finding a little motive from scratch in that sequence of notes and then working around those. And that's how we ended up with this. Which we pushed further here and here. So yeah, we want to sort of like, you know, keep it nice and simple and build on that before we get carried away. We started over existing chords. So the previous video, this has been a whole series of music theory for electronic music producers. We started with rhythm, we then added bass to that. We then added a harmony video. This is the melody video. So if you haven't seen those part 1, 2, and 3, they're linked in the description below. I do suggest checking them out. Let me know, give them a thumbs up, drop a comment, let me know if you found them helpful, right? So here we started over existing chords using the chord from the harmony video, and we've gone through techniques for building your melody over those chords. So that worked well. And we went down through this big old list here. And now we've just picked on house music and gone for a simple house piano hook to sit over a house drum groove and a bass line, right? And hopefully, as I said, the little tips I've given about starting with a piano, develop your melody, then change to the fancy presets and synthesizers you will find helpful along your way of doing this, and all the other little tips and tricks. So finally we have on our house. That was my last very simple one. It needs a little bit of connecting like we've got here, but it was the great starting point. All right, so on that note, as always, thank you very much to all of you who participated in today's stream. Just on a side note, if you would like to learn more about Ableton Live and how I can help you, you can always book a free coaching call with me. There's a link below in the description, and we can jump in a chat and talk about you and your music and your goals, and just have a friendly chat. See if it's a good fit, and I can talk to you all about how I can help you in coaching. It's something I've been doing for like 20, 30 years in Ableton Live for schools like Point Blank and so on and so forth. So, as always, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to the channel. And of course, I will hope and look forward to seeing you next time. Have an amazing rest of your weekend. We do have one more video in this series, potentially, which would be a bit of an overview where I look at harmony, Harmonic rhythm, I didn't go into that too far today. In the melody one, we've done rhythm of the melody and the melody because it's so tied together. It's a must with the harmony. If we just take a quick look at that, the chords here, this is our chord progression from the previous video. There's not a lot of harmonic rhythm in that. The chords change on the bar in all of the chords. So they're like what we call block chords. So if we do something where we are starting to also get a rhythm in this, then we're talking about harmonic rhythm with the bass and the melody. So I think we've got one more video to go. That's my thoughts on that in this beginner friendly series. And then, like I said, all through this series, I've noticed I could probably easily do part 2, 3, 4, and 5 on things such as like the melody. We're just doing beginner friendly here. We can do more. So if you'd like to see more of that, let me know. It's always good to understand if I'm helping and that these things are useful and that you want to see those things. I pay attention to that. As I said, like Nakshatra likes the idea of a Q&A, then great, let's do a Q&A at some point. Okay, so there's lots more to come on this channel. I like ideas for videos. Feel free to share them with me. I will definitely add them into all the suggestion pot and then we'll bring them out. So on that note, like I said, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I'll drop the playlist to all of these videos that I've spoken about from the series at the end here. I do suggest checking all those out so you can pull the whole story together, and I will see you very soon in the next one. Take care, everybody. Over and out. Ciao.